A man and a woman were disturbed while exercising together. The door handle suddenly turned to open the door. They thought they would be caught cheating. However, the next second, the door handle returned to its original position. Kitty breathed a sigh of relief and said that it was good that the door was closed. But she was worried that the person standing outside was her husband who had returned from work early. She hurriedly opened the window to take a look, and she was temporarily relieved. When she was done, she walked out of the room and found a package on the table. She asked the maid and learned that her husband had left it. Kitty's body frowned instantly. It turned out that the person who tried to open the door and enter the room was indeed her husband. Kitty met her current husband, Walter, at a dinner party. Walter saw him in the crowd, so he deliberately walked over and politely invited her to dance with him. But Kitty had no feelings for Walter, just thought it was an ordinary conversation. However, Walter is a blind date arranged by Kitty's parents. They are worried that Kitty hasn't gotten married by the time she is old enough to get married, so they ask around if there is a good man. Walter fits the bill, and he is a PhD bacteria researcher working in Shanghai, China, and has a kind and gentle personality. But Kitty doesn't care about that. As a naive girl, she still believes that love is the most important thing. She resists the idea of marriage without love. Her stepmother disapproves of her ideas. She says that it is impossible to keep Kitty in the family. Kitty angrily leaves to get some fresh air, but when she opens the door, she sees Walter. Walter is holding a box of chocolates. His panicked look is obviously looking for Kitty. He sees Kitty and invites her for a walk. The two arrive at a flower shop, but before they get to know each other, Walter proposes to her. Kitty was dumbfounded and felt that everything came so suddenly. She had never seen a man like this before either. He said that he would do anything to make Kitty happy. Kitty was not moved by these words, but when she got home, she heard her stepmother talking on the phone about her marriage to Walter and that she had given up on Kitty a long time ago, which made her very sad. Kitty is not happy, but she finally gives in to reality and she marries Walter. The two of them arrived in Shanghai together. It was Kitty's first time out of her country. She was very happy with the freshness of things, and Walter's tenderness made her reluctantly accept this life. Walter treats her like a treasure and takes care of her carefully. But Walter was always quiet and busy only with his work. This made Kitty complain a little. Walter noticed Kitty's discontent and offered to play a game together, but it was just a boring card game. The only fun they had as a couple was going to a ball. That's where Kitty meets Charlie, the British vice consul. At that time, a Chinese opera was being performed on the stage. The Westerners watched in disbelief and tried to appreciate the art as much as they could. Charlie was always a flirt. He created an ambiguous atmosphere as he explained the opera to Kitty. He said that the opera was about a poor woman in a foreign country with unbreakable chains and cries for the lively and carefree girl she once was. Especially she hadn't tasted the sweetness of love. Kitty could only hear it and feel it. She was now in a loveless marriage. She started crying when she thought of her life as an invisible shackle. But this was just a story that Charlie had made up, and that was how Charlie entered Kitty's world. Kitty thought she had found love, although she knew that it was Walter who was coming back that day. But she didn't confess everything to Walter until Walter took the initiative to talk to her. Walter said that the cholera outbreak in Linzhong City in Guangxi was a very serious epidemic. Many doctors died from the infection and needed medical resources. Walter volunteered to lead the medical work. Not only did he want to go himself, but he also dragged Kitty with him. Kitty strongly opposed it. Walter threatened to divorce her because of her if she didn't go. He said that he wasn't that stupid. Then Kitty had to confess that she still believed that she and Charlie were in love. She said that Charlie would divorce his wife and marry her later. Walter laughed out loud at this naive woman, but he also felt very sad. He knew very well that Kitty had no feelings for him, but he had been hoping that Kitty would come to really love him after they spent more time together. Instead, he got this result. Walter was really disappointed. He asked Kitty to go to Charlie and tell him the truth, as long as Charlie could really marry Kitty. He didn't want Kitty to go to Guangxi. However, after Kitty explained everything to Charlie, Charlie refused. He said that his job status was impossible for him to marry Kitty. At this moment, Kitty finally understood that true love is just her fantasy. True love is just for fun. In the end, Kitty could only follow Walter to Guangxi in distress. To take revenge on his unfaithful wife, the husband forced her to take her to the land of cholera, end up dead or alive. After the two arrived in Guangxi, Walter deliberately distanced himself from Kitty. He spent his days quietly with a medical book in his hand, until some men carrying a palanquin appeared at the end of the road. Finally, they rode up the mountain in the palanquin. They encountered a funeral procession along the way, and paper money was flying. This made Kitty think that she would only face death in the future. They moved into a wooden building on the top of the mountain. Waddington is their only neighbor. Kitty learns through Waddington that Walter did not choose to come here for water. He chose the bumpy mountain road to get here on purpose to torment Kitty. The more Kitty thought about it, the angrier she became. Walter brought her to this land of cholera because he wanted her to die. As they slept in separate rooms, the disturbing sound of villagers exorcising ghosts could be heard outside. This haunts Kitty's mental world. At this time, the British are not welcome in China. The couple is in danger. The nearby regiments send a few simple police officers to ensure Kitty's safety. Walter spent most of his time monitoring the village. He crossed the river by boat and speculated that the water could be the main source of disease transmission. He took a sample from the well and analyzed it and found that the water was contaminated. The only solution was to seal the well. Although the villagers were unwilling, they were threatened by the officials and had to swear an oath and cooperate. Walter returned to the ward to see the patients in pain and felt very bad. He came back and spent all his time studying the data. He did not look at Kitty and did not communicate with her. Kitty was on the verge of collapse. At this time, the servant brought a pot of lettuce. Walter told him to take it down and cook the lettuce. Otherwise, they might get infected with the virus. Kitty insists on keeping the lettuce and smiles as she eats it in big bites. She protested against Walter's silence and indifference by bedding. In Walter's opinion, this act was tantamount to suicide. He frowned for a few seconds, then took the lettuce and put it directly into his mouth. If she was going to die, he would die with her. His heart had been dead from the moment he learned of Kitty's betrayal. Kitty had to go out that day and met the villager who fell dead in front of her house. She was shocked and frightened to see the man's horrible death. She easily scared because of her unfamiliar surrounding, so she instinctively felt to get to know her neighborhood. Kitty, who was wearing a veil, began to get to know Walter. Kitty crossed the river by boat to the village. She arrived at the orphanage and saw the strange, resentful looks and abuse from others. There are nuns who do not want to leave children. She learns from the nuns that babies are often abandoned, and Walter loved these children. He tried to spend as much time as possible to help them. Kitty was touched by this. She had no idea that Walter had such a gentle side. She always thought that Walter was a boring and old-fashioned person. Kitty always came to the orphanage afterwards to help. She changed the baby's diapers. Walter was shocked to see her all dirty. Walter thought she was a lady who never worked. He didn't think that Kitty had such a side. Often, affectionless marriages between people are the result of a lack of understanding from the start, which leads to many misunderstandings about the partner. Walter stood at the door and watched Kitty play the piano for the children. He felt like he was back in London at the ball and remembered the feeling of love at first sight. That night they talked seriously about what had happened earlier. Kitty asked him her question. Why didn't Walter open the door when he knew Charlie was in the room with her? He says that Charlie isn't worth the fight. The couple's misunderstandings seem to be cleared up. The woman is pregnant, but she is not happy. She is worried that the baby is not her husband's. Walter comes to see Kitty and is very happy, but his expression changes immediately after hearing that Kitty has been pregnant for over 2 months. Kitty cried and said that she didn't know who the father of the baby was. Walter choked up for a moment. Then he said that it didn't matter. Walter chose to forgive his wife because he loved Kitty more than anything else. He had previously discovered that the villagers had buried people who had died of cholera by the river. This is the source of the contaminated water. To solve the problem of the in the water of the villagers, and was inspired by Kitty and prepared to build a large water wheel. The water wheel was powered by water from the stream and used bamboo joints as pipes. This would bring clean water to the village. Walter's work was going well, and his relationship problems seemed to be solved. He went to the Waddingtons' house that night to ask for something to drink. Kitty followed behind him. They listened to Waddington's love story together. Waddington had saved a fisherman's family by chance. The fisherman's young daughter fell in love with him and married him. Kitty wanted to know why she fell in love with Waddington. She said it was because Waddington was a good man. Kitty listened attentively because she was now also impressed by Walter's virtues and seemed to have fallen in love with him. Late at night, the couple is drunk. Kitty deliberately takes off her long dress in front of Walter. Her long suppressed feelings finally burst out at that moment. They spent a sweet night together. They finally traveled as a couple after that. Kitty sat on a bamboo raft to enjoy the beautiful scenery and enjoyed her time in the picturesque landscape. But they did not have much time to enjoy their happiness. The great crisis came. Water had solved the water problem, but cholera was still there. Refugees from other places came to the city with new sources of infection. At that time, conflict was rampant and the number of patients increased. Walter broke down while trying to save the refugees. Kitty had to come to see Walter. Despite all the advice, she watched Walter's life fade away before she truly understood his love for her. The tangle of love and hate that existed at the end of his life is only one part. Walter became a shovel full of dirt in a foreign country. Death became his tribute to love. Kitty was left standing in the same place. Kitty returned to London alone and gave birth to a son. A few years later, she met Charlie on the street. Charlie continues to flirt shamelessly with her. At this point, Kitty walks away with a firm step. The film is based on William Somerset Montgomery's novel The Painted Veil, but that film shifts the focus to the couple's ultimate understanding and warmth. There are men who are faithful to their wives. There are men who have a daily affair and say that not everything has to be taken too seriously. There are women who are intelligent and know how to fight for happiness. Some women are addicted to their desires and find it difficult to break free. The image of the veil in the film is not exactly the veil of life. It is also the veil of feelings. Maybe there is a Walter inside every woman. Maybe they have thought of marrying such a man. They may also have thought that they cannot harm a good man like that. But a film is still a film. You have to experience your own life.